Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to episode 133 of the We Can't Wrestle podcast. Nate Maxon, your host, here with you, along with, going to shake it up a little bit this time, Archie Mitchell.
What's up, everybody?
And, of course, my brother Aaron is here.
Hello, hello, hello.
And this week, we got two words for you. Suck it! We're going to be discussing the Attitude Era, the good and the bad of the WWF Attitude Era this week on the We Can't Wrestle podcast. When I'm formulating my thoughts, I kept trying to stick to WWF, not go into WCW, because we're not talking about the Monday Night Wars. But WCW will probably come up a little bit because, Vince Russo is going to come up, et cetera, et cetera.
I have one WCW.
And I know Aaron had posted in our Facebook group for some listeners to give their suggestions. We'll go through those as well. Before we start the show this week, I want to thank everyone that is so far listening to WrestleNet Radio. Listenership is going much better than I thought it would for the first few weeks. So keep getting the word out, sharing the page. People are sharing the page. People are sharing the station. I'm really excited about this. Wrestling Talk 24/7.
The We Can't Wrestle Network.
Yes, the We Can't Wrestle Network.
And if any Apple executives are listening to this,
can
you push the damn app through?
I'm gonna send another nasty gram this week to Apple. You can download the WrestleNet Radio app in the Google Play Store.
Yes.
If you do have an Apple phone, though, there is a link on the page, and I put it in our Facebook group, that you can actually click that link, open it in your Safari, and then mark that as a bookmark. And I guess for right now, that'll have to act as your app. But Archie's show debuted this week. If you smell what the Arch is cooking.
Yes.
And did very well.
Well, thank you for that. I was a little nervous, but I tried to just make it more fun and off the cuff as opposed to just being regulated. And, I had notes, but I didn't really stick to all of them.
Well, and not to mention, you're like Joey Styles, man. You did it solo. It's hard to go solo sometimes.
It is. But
without being able to feed off of someone else.
Aaron and I were talking about possibly doing a show together about Smoky Mountain, and I'm interested to do that. But when it comes to, newer product, and this is not to be selfish or anything, I like to be a little bit more solo so that I can just get my points out. Because when I'm with one of you guys, we go 4 hours, and then it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I didn't want my debut show to be, oh wow, Archie's still going on hour 3? What's going on here?
Well, then you're like, oh my God, would Nate shut up about Omega for Christ's sake?
No. Omega shit to bed this week. That promo was horrible.
Oh, it was awful. Well, not that I expected any less when I had Omega and Orange Cassidy on the same screen at the same time.
This no disrespect to Jake Roberts, but Kenny Omega sound more coked out than Jake Roberts ever did this past week on Dynamite. He sounded like he was high, drunk, and didn't know what the hell he was supposed to be talking about. And all you see is Tony Schiavone going, okay, come on, let's hurry it up. Come on, guys.
Move it along, little doggy.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I have a surprise for you guys. Before we start the Attitude Era talk.
Oh.
I have been trying to work. I've been thinking about working, or not thinking about, but every time I'm going to work this into the show, something happens, I forget about it, whatever. For Christmas this past year, my daughter bought me for Christmas, because she knows I like collecting wrestling things, no matter how silly it is or whatever, I want it. She bought me the official WWE cookbook for Christmas, all right?
My children said they want to get me that for Father's Day. I said, no, please don't do that.
What I want to do right now is because some of these recipes or some of these dish names are punny, Punny, and I think you guys might get a kick out of some of them. So I'm gonna go through the cookbook here and read you some of these. I think some of them are gonna pop you. Okay. Are you ready, Aaron?
Sure.
This is fun. All right. You'll have a wrestler. You can't see it, folks, but you'll have like a wrestler, and there's a theme. This wrestler has a dish named after him or whatever. So in the breakfast, we have the Big Boss Ham Steak Donuts. How about Baquista? Bakishta?
Oh my God.
Oh God.
Degeneration eggs. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. How about Biscuits and Gravy Boy Smith?
All right, that in the bag. That I liked. That was good. The first three were really bad, but that one was good.
Is there an Owen Tart?
I don't know. I haven't got that far
Owen
yet.
Tart. Oh my god.
Let's see here. I'm just let's see here. Salsa Banks.
Okay.
I'm gonna put some sound effects in this, like womp womp
That
womp.
one
womp.
was a little racist because she's Spanish. I think she's half Spanish, so that's kind of bad.
Ayatollah of Capicola Melt for Chris Jericho. How about Soup Lex City?
How about you keep going?
Yeah, how about keep going?
Prawn Michaels. I'm going to leave the silence in. That's funny. Hey, Stone Cold has some oh hell yams for you.
That was bad.
Let me see here. Randy Cornton. Michael Coleslaw.
Oh, God.
Sergeant Slaughter, Slawter. Sergeant Slaughter.
So there's two types of coleslaw?
Yes, two types of slaw. Andre the Gyro.
That was bad.
Braun Stroganoff.
Okay.
Let's see here. Jerry the King Crab Lawler.
Nah.
I like the nah. I swear there are some other funny ones in here. Let's see. Rikishi pork buns. That's not funny. Chicken rock pie. Brutus the Barber beefcakes. Yes, they're in here. There are Brutus the Barber.
Well, I know one thing. Aaron
beefcakes
won't
in
be
here.
coming over for dinner if you're cooking.
Yes. Let me see. Still going through here. Sorry. I didn't prepare. I didn't do any bookmarks in the.
I was expecting like a Godfather and hoe cakes or something, something like.
Yeah, no, they don't. They don't touch on the Attitude Era much in this. This is
well, at least
for the family.
Let's see.
Truffle H, Ric Flair's Whoopie Pie.
Okay.
Okay.
How about Hulk Hogan's I Can't Believe It's Not Brother?
Oh, I can't believe it's not brother.
Yeah, brother.
How about for a beverage, some Coffee Kingston or Ginger Mahal?
I like both. Okay.
I think that's all we got. All right. I had to go through some of them.
I'm going to text my wife tomorrow morning at like 6:30 a.m. Honey, can I get some coffee? Some coffee? She's going to be like, you motherfucker. No.
So I told my daughter at some point the cookbook would be part of the show, so I kept my promise as a father.
Why no like Hercules?
Hercules. Maybe that's a mission we could go on. We could come up with 5 of our own recipes for the next show.
I like that.
Because we can be offensive with ours. WWE had to play it safe.
Well, the Sasha Banks one was pretty offensive to me.
That was one of the ones I actually found that Degeneration Eggs. I don't know why that got me. It's so simple, but it's funny. All right, guys. We've done the haphazard punny humor there. Let's get into the WWF.
How about a Barry
Windham?
Yeah, like a glazed ham with Barry Windham's name.
A Barry Windham, yeah.
Yeah.
A Paul Berry pie.
oh yes.
Bruno San Martino and meatballs.
Not gay Bruno though.
Yeah, gay Bruno likes meatballs.
Not gay Bruno.
let's not go back into that debauchery.
No.
That shit went off the rails.
I feel bad because I'm the one that started it, and then it went from there, and then Chad just took it and ran with it.
When Chad, I think you were gone by the time we came up with that one. With the one, I think Chad came up with it, but Chad was like, after he listened to the episode, he said Barry Von Erich is gold, and I don't even remember the connotation of Barry Von Erich, but we were pretty bombed by the end of that episode.
Mr. T-Bone.
Mr. T-Bone.
And a side of he loves his mama fries. No, that night we recorded, my sinuses were killing me, and I took a Claritin. And Nate, about 20 minutes later, I was in space. I was just like, woo.
You should have joined us because we were all in space by the time the show ended.
I'm sure it would have been funny, but like I couldn't move. I don't know why Claritin does that to me. It makes me feel like I took like an Oxycontin or something.
Anybody that hasn't listened to episode 132, go back and listen to it just to listen to the story that Chad tells about how King Kong Bundy broke his futon.
Wow.
King Kong Bundy broke his why do I want to keep saying tufon? What the fuck is a tufon, Nate? Anyway, futon. King Kong Bundy broke Chad's futon. All right. So
wait a minute, Nate, I got one.
Oh.
Rakishi fondue.
Well, I got one.
Go ahead.
Meat.
Meat.
Oh shit. All right. The cookbook thing bombed as the beginning, but they can't all be 100%. Everybody.
Hey, it worked for me. I like that we get to make up our own.
Talking about the Attitude Era here, when do you guys say the Attitude Era started? Because if you look, a lot of people think
when did it officially start?
No.
Start in your mind.
They started. They officially kind of started it after WrestleMania 14, but in your mind, where did the Attitude Era start?
Can I say mine first?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To me, the Attitude Era started the night that Bret Hart pushed Vince McMahon on his ass.
Yeah. I mean, that's that's bullshit.
Mine.
That shit never fucking happened before that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, that's a good point. I somewhat agree with Aaron, but I guess you mentioned WrestleMania 14 and whatnot. I would say the night that Austin passed out to the sharpshooter with all the blood on his face and he just wouldn't quit was a sign of change because they weren't really letting a lot of blood fly back then. Right. You know, you could bleed, but they weren't letting a crimson mask get all over. And Austin had a crimson mask, so that was Vince's way of telling the fans at home, "We're going the whole way with it."
For me, the Attitude Era started in late August of 1995.
The Diesel promo? No, that's not the Diesel promo.
When we saw the first vignette for Gold Dust.
Yeah.
To me, that was kind of the. I know that isn't what they'd say. I know that's not what most people would say, but to me, that was the first time that Vince McMahon said, "Fuck it, let's do something a little edgy. We got to do something." You know, not that an androgynous character had never been around before. You had Adrian Street and like
Adonis.
But that pushing the envelope like that Goldust character did.
I mean, like during the promos when he was actually just in front of the Hollywood sign, he wasn't really talking that badly. He was just remarking old movies and doing
But then
but when he debuted,
when he started that feud with Razor, that was. So to me, that's kind of it, and I can see where people would say, "Yeah, but it took another couple of years before it was really." But I really do think that
Goldust was the tipping point, though. Yeah,
that was and then into '96, you have the Austin 316 promo, and just the ball starts rolling, man, and we're off to the races. And I think, and we'll get into it a little deeper, but the early part of that, from '96 until probably the end of '98. To me, the Attitude Era jumps the shark in '99, but we'll get into that. All right. Yeah. So Aaron said he had did like a top 6 and a worst 6, and I guess we'll kind of let that. If you want to, because my list really isn't very organized, Aaron. So if you want to, I didn't do a list per se. So if you want to start with, do you want to start with the good?
Sure.
And run down your thing there, and then we can kind of.
I love lists. It's a hobby of mine, and I'll just start right at the top. You said you want me to do best first, right?
Yeah, you can run down all 6 of them. We can talk.
All right. Well, number 1 was during the Attitude Era, and it is something that doesn't even exist now, was everyone had something going on. That makes sense.
Very true.
Like when the music would hit and the dude would come out the chute, he had a reason for coming out of the chute.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's gonna play into like a worse thing. That's the thing too with my list is there's things that are the best of it, but it also is the worst of it. But like in the Attitude, like Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara, for everything that you want to say about those guys, and I know they had shitty ideas and they did hurt the business somewhat. But when they first got into it, man, they wanted to make sure that every single person on that roster had some reason for being on TV. If that
You're
makes
right about that.
sense.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
even
Russo,
Steve Blackman had a storyline going on. And,
yeah,
you know,
Russo said it before that he would go to Vince's house and, I mean, take Vince Russo for what you want, but he said he'd go to Vince's house and he'd say, "What's going on with Austin? What's going on with The Rock? What's going on with Foley? What's going on with Taker?" And then maybe a fifth whatever in there. And everybody else, they would just they'd have their list of 20 guys and they'd make sure something was going on with them. You know what I mean?
right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And I think that, to its credit, that's what kind of made the hardcore title a good point of the Attitude Era too, because there were 20, like Aaron said, there were 20 guys trying to get that belt off of whoever the 24/7 hardcore champion was. So right there you had, guys, right, like today's 24/7 champion. It's a little fluky. If it wasn't for R-Truth, that thing wouldn't be as good as it is. But in the hardcore era when we had it, everybody had some Crash Holly, Hardcore Holly, Stevie Richards. There were guys running around the arena having decent matches for that belt. So yes, to Russo's credit, he deserves that credit for that.
And that's a good point. Like I was saying, like if Mike Lockwood was around now, he'd just be on 205 live and not have anything going on, and he'd be wrestling with Ricochet or fucking Drew Gulak every week, and nobody would give a shit. But Vince Russo was like, "Hey, let's find something for Crash, the 24, the Hardcore Championship," and that Hardcore Championship had the potential to be really stupid, but they gave a guy something, and he went with it, and Crash made that fucking thing entertaining, and that doesn't exist anymore.
And I will touch on that a little bit on one of my lists or one of my little bullet points here. But what was next on your
on my list?
Yeah.
This is the only non-WWF thing from the Attitude Era that I put, and it was the original NWO, not like when it became like 50 guys. But the reason I put the original NWO on it is because the original NWO, more than anything else, forced Vince's hand.
Yeah, well, and that is okay. That is one of my. I will mark off here one of my positives or my good things of the Attitude Era, and that's where I said that I didn't mention WCW a lot because I tried to stick to WWF, but I think you're kind of getting to the same thing I am here, Aaron. Was during that era, because of the Monday Night War, the wrestling companies were doing their best and trying hard to keep us watching their show. They wanted, like if I watch Raw today, I don't feel like Vince McMahon is trying to keep me as a viewer.
Nope.
In whether good or bad, and we'll get into some of the bad, whether good or bad, if you watch a Raw or a Nitro from the Monday Night War era, you can tell, again, whether it was crap or it was good, that wrestling company was trying to keep you as a viewer, watching that show for 2 hours every single week.
I agree. There's a show I watch on YouTube, Nate and Aaron, called Reliving the War. And this guy scores Raw versus Nitro, point for point. Mm-hmm. And now, because at this point in the show that he's watching, Nitro went to 2 hours. Raw is still only 1 hour. But he gives an unopposed point. Like if Raw was starting, would he still keep watching Nitro, or would he flip over to Raw and watch the next hour of Raw? And that's what I think was what was good about it. It made you really want to pick and choose if you were going to keep watching or not on Monday nights, or were you going to even watch Nitro, or were you going to wait till the next morning on tape? And
Right.
and then the best part about it was both companies would wait till the last 20 minutes of their show to tell you what was going to happen next week. So you'd want to be watching next week. Like, oh, we're going to have Macho Man versus the Giant on Nitro next week for the world title. Or it's going to be Goldust versus Razor for the Intercontinental title on Raw. And you'd go, as a kid, because we were all teenagers back then, we'd go, damn, I better be watching Raw and Nitro next week.
Right.
Now it's like they tell you in the first 10 minutes of Raw, oh, next week it's going to be Drew McIntyre in a rematch with Braun Strowman, and everybody goes, again?
And see, the like one of the reasons I put that on my list is because Eric Bischoff has said before that he was like, riding his wave, and these things are reversed. So I'm just prefacing that.
Mm-hmm.
But Bischoff said like he was riding his wave, and then they did the Tyson thing, and that made him go, whoa.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, gee, whoa. These guys are competition again.
Yeah,
Right.
they're serious.
Yeah, like this shit's serious. I honestly think, and he'll never say it because Vince isn't that. He's a type A personality, so he'd never say something like this. I think when Hogan turned and became a bad guy, Vince McMahon was probably like, "Whoa,
yeah.
Oh, definitely.
These guys are doing something." You know, like does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
I think Hogan turning was Vince's Bischoff's Tyson moment. You know what I mean? Like, okay, these guys are fucking.
They're serious.
Yeah, they're thinking outside the bun here. You know what I mean?
Well, if you look at both companies, Vince felt that Hogan couldn't get over anymore. Hulkamania had run its course, so he let him go. He went to WCW for 2.5 years. They tried the Hulkamania stuff. It wasn't getting Hogan over anymore. Fans were booing.
It was
So what
awful.
did they do? They turned Hogan heel.
Babyface Hogan in WCW was awful.
It was like reliving the 80s, but worse.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
It was
like the 80s without cocaine.
Right.
It was like a really good macaroni and cheese, but then you have to microwave it so some of the noodles get all crunchy, and yeah, it's that's a stupid analogy. I had really good macaroni and cheese tonight. I'm sorry.
Well, that's good. That's good. You got to give me the recipe then. The flip side of things is
it was the Drew McIntyre and cheese.
On the flip side, WCW
don't look at me like that.
Threw Steve Austin on his ass when Hogan got there, and Austin was floundering, and now he gets to WWE. Vince finally lets him do what the hell he wants, and Austin becomes the megastar there.
Yeah.
So, like Aaron said, you got Austin and Tyson, which was the oh shit moment for Bischoff. Hogan turning to the NWO was definitely the oh shit moment for Vince.
What's next on your list, Aaron, of positives from the Attitude Era?
It's 2 feuds in a row, and I know one of them is going to be on everybody's list, but I'm going to say Undertaker versus Kane.
Mm-hmm. The first
incarnation of it.
Yeah, the first incarnation of that feud is up there with Hogan and Savage as one of the greatest stories of WWE ever
Without
told.
a doubt.
Yes.
And they're still telling it to this day.
And I was about to say, as the years go on, it got a little convoluted. They ignored it. But that first, and yes, you're absolutely right. That first initial Kane Undertaker.
And that's what I was gonna say. That was that first incarnation. And I know a lot of people think the Artful Dodger is full of shit, and he like rewrites history, and he probably does because he's been taught by Vince. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I firmly believe that when Bruce talks about the angle and everything that he thought of, like I think Bruce Pritchard is being factual when he's saying this is the idea I thought of, and it was great, and it was great. And then when Vince Russo got his hands on it, it just became kind of convoluted.
Mm-hmm.
But the original like build up, and it's also I'll give a little bit of leeway on the fact that it kind of got convoluted because I don't think they knew what they had when they had it, if that makes sense. And it was kind of like the same thing with The Undertaker. Like the Undertaker gimmick, folklore goes that it was supposed to be a 6-month thing and then Hogan beat him and then it would be done.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the plan with Kane, honestly. I think the plan with Kane was that he comes in, Taker beats him, and then he's out.
Mm-hmm.
But then they realized, holy shit.
Yeah, no, they realized that
No,
as
no
soon as
pun
it started.
intended. No pun intended. But this thing's on fire. You know,
Right.
like people like this shit. So then it's like, oh, where do we go now? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think if they knew it was going to be more than what it was, they would have had Taker beat him like he did at WrestleMania.
When they as time went on, I mean, you got to think this. Undertaker and Kane's probably the longest story ever told in the history of wrestling.
Oh,
because
definitely.
those guys were intertwined for like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But as time went on, there were so many silly things they did, but there were also great things, like when Undertaker returned at WrestleMania 20. They would do things with Undertaker and Kane where they'd come back together, and then the Brothers of Destruction were cool. But if we're talking about just the Attitude Era, where they killed it for me was when they were like, oh yeah, actually the Undertaker set the fire. And
right.
Like that was Russo. That had Russo all over
Russo
it. Like,
took it over.
It's like, fuck. That ruined it during the Attitude Era for me. But they resurrected it and throughout their intertwining careers, and at times it became a captivating story again. You just had to forget that they ruined it by saying Undertaker burnt the house down, and WWE did too. After Russo left, they never mentioned that again. If you noticed, they were like, "Fuck that! He didn't burn the house down. Kane did."
The thing that made me love that storyline was, up until then, the Undertaker was the Undertaker. He was unstoppable. He was unbeatable. He was this monstrous zombie wizard. Whatever you want to call him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Kane got there, it forced the Undertaker to become humanized. Because he had a family now. He had a younger brother who he thought was dead. He had, Paul Bearer saying things about his family and showing their graves. But then it wasn't just he was the Undertaker anymore. He was Mark Calloway.
Mm-hmm.
He actually became a real person. And then as time went on, like they always say, he kept making that character different every time, but for the better. Right. You know what I mean? Like if Kane never showed up, we might have just had Dead Man Undertaker for 30 some odd years.
Mm-hmm.
Where with Kane coming in, we got Biker Undertaker, we got Cowboy Undertaker, we got, back to being the regular Undertaker. And up until just recently with the Hall of Fame, the WWE's always called them brothers. They have never been anything more than brothers. Where you look at other storylines like Edge and Christian, after a little while it became, they were just best friends who used to hang out and go to wrestling events together.
I have to tell you, Archie, WWE missed the opportunity for a great name there.
Cowboy Undertaker?
No, I had to write it down. Archie referred to Undertaker as a monstrous zombie wizard. That's
well, when you think about it, he was a dead.
I love that. I love
tricks,
it's the monstrous zombie wizard.
Zombie wizard.
With his manager, the Yeti.
And I know what's other story you were going to mention, Aaron. It's probably the one that I have on my good list too.
Yeah. So it was just Vince and Austin.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Steve Austin and Vince McMahon's feud.
I don't want to. I'll let you guys talk about it and expound on it some more. But that's why I was talking about the Attitude Era, starting with Brett pushing Vince on his ass.
Right.
Because honestly, they tried it with Brett before they fully went with it with Austin.
Yeah.
Right.
Like Vince and Brett was the first time that I know of that Vince was somewhat acknowledged as like a boss.
Right.
And the first time, other than when he got hit with the chair in the Flair Piper thing, which was just was meant to be like a
fluke. Yeah.
A fluke. It was the first time that a wrestler was going at Vince saying, you're fucking me, which Brett didn't say that until he pushed him on his ass, obviously. But that, I feel like that's what they were somewhat going for then, and they just didn't completely do it. but then they did with Steve,
Mhm.
and it worked out better that way. Like,
Well,
there's
absolutely.
no way Brett versus Austin or Brett versus Vince would have been as fucking phenomenal as
No,
Brett
No,
versus.
because Brett wouldn't
not
have went
even
that hard.
close.
Yeah,
Not
Brett
even
wouldn't have
close.
went that hard. He would have been too
But
relaxed and too,
but yeah, Austin and Vince is
And how many other things during that era spawned off of that feud?
Oh yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it's
And
just
they're still trying to
like
recreate it to this day.
like we've discussed in the past on this show, and just a comparison, it's like Tommy Dreamer and Raven in ECW. There were so many
Right.
things that so many other feuds and other personalities and other possibilities, the possibilities, baby, that came out of that, you know, and so much stuff spurned off of just Vince and Austin feuding with each other. Two guys would be involved in that thing, and then they wouldn't even be involved in that anymore. They'd be fighting each other. Like, we don't give a shit about Vince and Austin anymore.
Right.
And my and I've said this plenty of times, and like I said, I'll let you guys talk about it some more. But one of, one of my favorite things out of the Austin McMahon feud was the first time Vince takes a stunner in Madison Square Garden. He is fucking paralyzed.
Yep.
He takes the goddamn stunner, and he is on the ground, and he is done.
Okay, he was
just
murdered.
done.
Yeah.
Like, they're taking him out. Like, it's like the fucking Kennedy assassination. He's fucking done. But by like 99, he's like taking a stunner, and then he just pops up, and he's like, God damn it.
He developed an immunity, or
Yeah,
sort of an immunity. To
Yeah.
an immunity to the stunner. It's so fucking funny. And like, how to, like, nobody wrote, I shouldn't say nobody wrote that. That storyline was written, but nobody wrote, oh, hey, Vince, you're going to go out and you're going to say this, this, and this. And Steve, you say this, this, and this.
No.
Vince McMahon and Steve Austin are the greatest combination of people ever. Like,
Vince
nobody
is-
needed to tell Steve and Vince what the fucking
No, and their reactions to each other, they are as good, and I'll just say it. Those two in the history of entertainment, those two are as good together as they're like Abbott and Costello, the Marx Brothers, Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. You guys get what I'm saying? Like, these two
Oh
guys,
yeah, they work together perfectly.
these two guys went together, like Forrest Gump would say, like peas and carrots. Like, they just
peanut
like,
butter
it
and
was-
jelly, man.
Yes, they were meant
And-
to work together for over a year, 2-3 years. They were meant to intertwine. They were meant to work together.
And then when it was all said and done, Steve stunned his entire fucking family, and that was like the best send off for the whole thing. It was fucking great.
I was only happy when he stunned Linda. She deserved more than that.
I mean, think of all the great moments that came out of it.
Oh yeah,
Fucking the concrete in the car, like when those windows blow up.
and Vince's reaction, or or just Austin going, "You ain't got the balls to fire me. I got balls the size of grapefruits, pal." Like, just, and then it became
When he kidnaps him.
And
When they're in that little
he had
room,
the
he
pop gun.
kidnaps him.
Yeah,
That, the pop gun's great because he pisses himself.
right.
But the best part of the pop, like the Bang 316, is everything leading up to it. Like when he's just
Oh yeah.
when he fired him.
Shaquille
Yeah, what are you doing? The fuck out! And like Shaquille doesn't even leave.
Yeah.
He's like, "Fuck off, Vince." But when he's just in the room with, that's even funny too because Steve got fired at that breakdown pay-per-view or whatever.
Mhm.
And Vince is in his limo, and he's like, "This is mine now, mine," or whatever. And then he shows up, and he's got the firearm, and the cops are like, "Oh, you're Steve Austin, you're cool, man." And like, he ends up signing like autographs for his kids, and the cops leave, and Vince is like, "What the hell was that?" Like, and Patterson sees that Steve has a gun, And he's just like, "Oh, I gotta go get you coffee.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get you coffee." And then
Let me get
Briscoe's like,
Mr. McMahon his
and
coffee.
Briscoe's like, I don't know where Pat's at with the coffee. And then he's gotta leave to go find Pat with the coffee, and Shane's just like, I got a match. I gotta go. And they're all just fucking abandoning him. It's fucking great.
in his wheelchair.
Yeah, he's in that fucking wheelchair. Oh man, that's one of the best fucking Raws ever.
What's next on your list?
I wrote Blurred Lines. This is one of my favorite things.
The Robin
about
Thicke song?
No,
Oh.
it's a good song, and that video's awesome. This is those scantily clad women, which was something good about the Attitude Era as well.
Yes.
No defined baby faces or heels. Like everybody has an ulterior motive in what they're doing.
That would be on my bad list. Because
Okay.
I like my pro wrestling to have baby faces and heels. I like a tweener when they stand out. A tweener should stand out. Everybody shouldn't be a tweener. That's just my personal opinion. But that's one of the things that I had on my bad list of the Attitude Era was the shades of gray, because it's okay for a character or two to be a shade of gray, but for everybody to be a shade of gray, this is where we get. I'll get into it later with the negatives, but I don't see. I guess I don't see eye to eye on that one. I like defined baby faces and heels in wrestling.
Well, while I agree with you, Nate, you are correct. The problem with the Attitude Era, and this is a bad part, is the fans were really dictating who they wanted to cheer for,
and they should, and they should,
but
And that might. Oh, sorry, Archie.
no, but I mean, you look at a guy like Kurt Angle. He was meant to come in as a babyface. He was meant to be an American hero. And one weekend, they were booing the shit out of him. You know what I mean? Until he enjoyed the boos, and then they cheered for him. Mm-hmm. So the fans, I say this about the Daniel Bryan storylines, that they force him into title matches. And back then, and I'm guilty of it too, we all booed people we maybe shouldn't have booed, and we cheered people we shouldn't have cheered. And that maybe made Vince go, well, fuck it, let everybody do what they want.
And that's kind of what I was getting at with the blurred lines thing. Was it's like, okay, and that's why I said defined. Mm-hmm. Like, not necessarily saying, okay, this guy's a bad guy, you gotta hate him. You know what I mean? Like in the 80s, and the 80s is great, like when they brought in the $1 Million Man, okay, which was a great gimmick. He was projected automatically as you're supposed to hate this guy.
Right.
That's what I was trying to say with like the blurred lines thing, is where let's let the people decide whether or not this is a heel or a face. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like
right.
if you would look at the character of, say, the Godfather. Okay, the Godfather on the surface is a bad guy.
Right.
He's a pimp. Yeah.
It's a pimp. But let's let him go out there, and everybody's like, hey, yeah. He's bringing out the big titties and everything.
We love hoes. Yeah.
That was also the United States in the late '90s. God, we were a horrible pillar of salt society.
Yeah. until those buildings came down, it was fucking debauchery, man.
Yeah, buddy.
But to Aaron's credit, he's right, because y'all remember the Al Snow Big Boss Man storyline?
Yep. And which was based on a Mr. Fuji rib, by the way.
Right. And then Boss Man feeds Al Snow his dog. Mm-hmm. And I for one laughed hysterically at that and went, wow, that was awesome. When I shouldn't have, because he just fed a man his dog. You know what I mean?
Well,
that makes me a sick individual.
We won't get into it too deep, but let's be honest. Low key, the Big Boss Man heel in the WWF Attitude Era is one of the greatest heels of all time. It's a fucking prick. Like, he has no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
That was the one dude that had no blurred lines.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, he was a heel, but people were cheering for him.
No, they didn't, Arch.
Whenever it went,
If you go back and watch it when it went when it hit, those people were like, "Boo!"
Yeah,
Like, they
but
fucking hated Ray
my
Trailer.
point. Yeah, but my point is though, he did a few things that, although on the surface were like cringeworthy, be like Big Show riding on his dad's coffin. You know what I mean? But there were. See what I mean? Look. That's exact what Nate just did. Is
I
what I
love
did
that.
as a
I
teenager.
love
I
that
went, "Oh
fucking
God,
shit,
what's
man.
going on here?" You know? It's like, and here's the thing: when they do a tribute to Ray Trailer, they always show that. Like, this is what his claim to fame. He made a guy ride off on his dad's coffin. You know what I mean? So,
what was next on your list, Aaron?
All right, this is my last best
Okay.
Attitude Era as the Three Faces of Foley.
I will agree with that.
That was a good burp, by the way.
That was like a Mick Foley burp. Good job.
Yeah, and you know what? And he's on this. I'll just go over one. One of the things that I have as one of the good things of the Attitude Era is the ascension of Austin, Rock, and Mick Foley.
Agreed.
So I'll just group it all together. But I'll say this: as far as Mick goes, at that time, and we talk about sometimes on the show how after he got his success and everything, yeah, Mick's a little full of himself. Whatever, he earned it. I mean, he earned it.
Exactly.
What his ascension to main event status and being one of the top guys in the business is one of those things in wrestling. Like I always say, the thing that makes me smile the most in wrestling is to watch Eddie Guerrero, but to watch Mick Foley rise
Agreed.
is also something that makes me smile, because did a guy ever work harder to get where he got?
Right.
In that era, I'm sure that fucking Harley Race worked super hard, but I'm just saying in that era of wrestling, to watch Mick rise up and become a main eventer against even the promoter that promoted him to the main event. When Vince McMahon first laid his eyes on
that's
Mick
what I was
Foley,
gonna. That's
like,
what I was gonna say.
Where does this fat slob work into my plans?
That's what I was gonna say. Was he got, and people can say what they want to say about him. He got the biggest wrestling fan. He got over with the biggest wrestling fan in the world, Vince McMahon.
He was the guy that should have never gotten over with Vince McMahon. Like if
Vince McMahon told Jim Ross, "I'm going to let you hire Mick Foley so you can learn what it's like to be let down by people that you love."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then Mick Foley got himself so over that Vince McMahon was like, "Holy fuck, where has this guy been?"
Yeah.
Right. And that's
this
the thing.
Flat ass, toothless
maniac
is fucking fantastic.
Right.
Yes.
And we talked about Vince and Austin. How great was Mick and Vince together?
It made Sacco.
Yeah.
It actually is the reason that he did the "This Is Your Life" with The Rock, because he brought that clown and all that to Vince first, and then reused it with The Rock. So yeah, it's what made the hardcore title too. Vince gave it to Mankind. Mick Foley, to his credit, paid his dues for years before he even had to. Whether it was putting the ring together, whether it was driving to shows that he wasn't even on just to be there in case they needed somebody, sleeping in his car, not eating correctly, getting his ass beat by Vader all over the world, and Abdullah the Butcher and Van Hammer and everything in WCW. The torture he went through in ECW with Terry Funk and being burned. And then he gets to the WWF, and it's like he found the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like he was looking for the lost city of gold, and there it was. Because it all clicked.
And say everything you want to say about the talent of Dwayne Johnson, and I've said this plenty of times.
Oh, definitely.
That I think Dwayne Johnson is probably the most talented human being on the face of the planet. Because do I like all of his movies or anything? No. but that dude can do fucking anything that you want him to do.
Right.
But in the wrestling business, Dwayne Johnson wouldn't have become Dwayne Johnson without Mick Foley.
Mick helped to bring him out of his shell. I agree with you. I think Mick really, with all the jokes that he used to do with The Rock in the ring,
Well,
it
just
allowed The
fucking
Rock to be
putting the
more
guy
friendly.
over, man.
Right.
Like
Well, that too. Yeah.
like
But I mean,
within the wrestling business, The Rock would not be The Rock if Mankind wasn't there.
Nor Hunter.
I agree.
Yeah.
Mick made Hunter a bigger star than he could have ever imagined too.
And sorry, that's why I was to say I have respect for Rock because Rock admits it. Hunter doesn't. And I think that's wrong.
Well,
go ahead, Archie.
Well, no, just real quick. I made a statement to Mrs. Mitchell the other night. We were watching Raw, and she said, "Wow, Randy Orton got old." And I said, "Well, he's the last of his class that came in with John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Batista. It was those four guys coming in from OVW." In that same regard, Foley, Austin, Rock, and Triple H all came up at that same time. They were the main four, and those four guys, to their credit, made WWE in the Attitude Era, along with The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, no discredit to them, and Bret Hart, but the established stars actually stood back and let these new up and comers take the flag and run with it, take the ball. And thank God that they did, because these guys really made WWF what it was during the Attitude Era.
And
if
look
they
what
weren't there, we were with the new generation. We were stuck with new generation and Mantar and TL Hopper. No disrespect to Tony Anthony, I happen to love him, but we were stuck with
the plumber
Sturman,
gimmick.
Sparky Plug.
The plumber gimmick, not exactly flattering.
And then speaking of like Orton, and then if you don't mind, we can maybe take a break.
Yeah.
Cool. But speaking of Orton, and we're talking about Foley, how much does fucking Edge and Randy Orton owe to Mick Foley?
Oh, definitely.
Oh,
both of them.
Absolutely. Both of them. And
Foley learned that from Terry Funk.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I know we're getting into the weeds, but Foley is a guy that did he get full of his own shit for a little bit? Yeah. And that's fine. But Foley is a guy that doesn't, how do I want to say it? Like, he's like, I Mick Foley, I did this, this, and this. But he's not afraid to somewhat lose it to somebody else. That makes sense?
Yeah.
No,
like Steve, like Steve Austin isn't gonna. If you would ask Steve Austin tomorrow, hey, show up at this independent show and put this guy over, he ain't gonna do it.
No.
Mm-hmm.
But you say, hey Mick,
Brock Lesnar.
Hey Mick, we got this guy that we want to do something with. Okay, I'll fucking lay down for him.
I don't give a shit.
That's how Terry Funk was. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And Mick learned that from Terry Funk because Terry Funk was willing to do that for him, and that's, like I said, it's out in the weeds. But same with Foley, and also like the fucking Dude Love character was awesome, and face Dude Love was fun, but heel Dude Love was the coolest, man. Heel Dude Love was fucking great.
Before we take a break, let me run down just real quick because I won't go into. I put the Ascension of Austin, Rock, and Mankind. We have dug into it. Austin McMahon.
Sorry, my list was too long. I apologize.
That's okay. I just have two, because I had Austin, Rock, Mankind, their Ascension. Austin McMahon, yes. The promotions trying hard to keep fans was a great thing. So the actually, I guess the three things that I have that we can elaborate on just a little bit before we take our break, and then we'll come back with the negatives of the Attitude Era. The first thing that I have, Not necessarily, and not that the later version was bad, but the original D-Generation X. Hunter, Sean, and China. God damn, that was fun.
And Rick Rude.
And Rick Rude.
Rick Rude.
That was fun television, especially for that time, because like we've mentioned a couple of times before, this was something that we as wrestling fans back then, like we'd never seen anybody push the envelope like this. And yes, did Hunter and Sean shit on the business? Yeah, Jim Cornette, they did. But you know what? 16, 17-year-old me was laughing my fucking ass off because that was fun, man. It was fun.
Them playing strip poker in the middle of the match and fucking headbangers coming out. And they beat the headbangers up with a little poker table.
I did not sleep with that young intern. And as a matter of fact, we were up all night.
Yeah, that presidential address is gold.
And saying, like, between the hours of 9 and 10, he won't say shit.
Fuck.
Damn. Ass. Fuck.
Sean's like, God damn. I'm just like, watch your fucking mouth. And it's like, it was just, you know.
Oh, fuck me. Jesus.
Yeah.
Or how about this? Nobody knows Canada like I knows Canada. When he's like got the Canadian flag up his nose.
Brett even said that in that fucking sit down they did with Jim Ross. Brett was like, dude, they'll forgive you for screwing me in Canada, but they'll never forgive you for humping that flag. What was I just thinking about? Like when Sean put the gauze in his trunk, like put the gauze in his underwear and was like doing the suck it in Jim Ross's face. So it looked like he had big junk and he was like in JR's face. Yeah, the fucking DX. They were great. When China got her breasts done or whatever, Sean was like, if I had a nipple for every nickel. Yeah. When fucking Shamrock puts Sean on Raw, puts Sean in the ankle lock, and he has that fucking lollipop in his mouth the entire time. That is the biggest
fuck you
in the history of wrestling.
All right. The other two things that I have, one, and we kind of sort of elaborated on it with Mick and Triple H and Austin and Rock. The one thing the Attitude Era did well, and I will get into the undercards, some of the undercard stuff and what they did poorly in our next segment. But one thing that the Attitude Era did well, folks, you can never deny that as far as the top matches of that era, with your Austins and your Undertakers and your main events, they had epic main events during that era.
Oh yeah.
Like no matter how the other programs went on the undercard or whatever, man, the main event matches were always kick ass, nonstop.
They were can't miss. They were miss.
Absolutely.
And if you did miss them or forgot to record Raw, you bitched and moaned. You were like, damn it, what happened?
Or some of those pay-per-view main events, man. Like WrestleMania 15 is my second least favorite WrestleMania. I don't like WrestleMania 15. To me, WrestleMania 15 is a 4-hour-long Vince Russo fever dream. And it's not, to me, it's not WrestleMania quality until you get to that main event with Rock and Austin. And they bring the fucking house down.
And that what that was like I was saying with Vince Russo saying that he'd go to Vince's house and Vince would be like, what's going on with Rock? What's going on with Austin? What's going on with Mick? That was, and I wasn't there, obviously, so I don't know. But I guarantee that was Vince McMahon saying, Russo, Ferrara, you guys can do whatever you want to do with this.
Right, but Austin and Rock
won. But no, it wasn't even his. He was saying, Vince,
let them do their thing.
Ed, you do what you want to do with that. Fucking Pat's booking the rest of Pat's booking.
Yeah. Austin and Rock, yeah.
Yeah, Pat, that's Pat's. Say the fuck. Like, you can come up with how we get there, but Pat's going to finish it.
I have one more, and then we can take a break here. From the Attitude Era, another positive thing in the WWF, not since the mid, at least 80s, probably from let's say 98 until 2000 and late 2001, maybe WrestleMania 17. Let's say from 98 to WrestleMania 17. So about 3 years, the WWF had one of the best tag team rosters during the Attitude Era.
I agree with that.
You got the Dudleys, you got Edge and Christian, you got the New Age Outlaws, you got the Hardys, you've got APA, you've got Chuck and Billy. Fuck you if you don't like Chuck and Billy. That was a great tag team.
You missed one. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think the fucking Hollies were a great tag team.
Yeah.
No, they were.
Yeah.
They were.
They had the best tag team roster. Obviously, during that era, I think you can debate between, even though I tend to lean toward the 80s roster with the Hart Foundation and Demolition, the Killer Bees, the Bolsheviks, the, what have you. But that 90s, okay, in the Attitude Era, here's where the tag division was so important and so great. You had we just talked about those great main event matches. That tag division, that was where your innovation was coming from. You know what I mean? That was where those were guys that were elevating, those TLC matches and stuff. And we'll get into the negative of that in the next segment. But those were the guys that were elevating the business to what it was going to be in the next level.
If there's one thing I complain about nowadays, is too many multi-man matches, 6-man tag, 8-man tags, tag team turmoil matches with 17 tag teams running in. In the Attitude Era, it was a little more acceptable because you had good tag teams, and these matches would actually go 30 or 40 minutes because they allowed these guys to actually wrestle.
And they weren't on the weekly TV, and there weren't 4 on every card.
Right, exactly. And it was to get to a number 1 contenders match, not just because Drake Maverick pissed off the AOP. You know what I mean? Nowadays, it's not the same. Back then, it was, the Hollies want to be number 1 contender, but like you said, the Acolytes say they're going to be number 1 contender. But guess what? The Hardys won the TLC match, so they're going to. So, throw them all in one match. Let's see what happens.
Right. Yeah. And here comes Teddy Long.
But at least it made sense. There was continuity, and when they would get the number 1 contender, the other tag teams would fall in line, and then they would go after the belts afterwards. You didn't need another one the very next month and go, okay, now we need another number 1 contender. You had a number 1, number 2, number 5, number 7 contender. Exactly. Nowadays, it's like every week we need a new number 1 contender. We'll put 5 guys in a match. Let's see what happens. Why?
Aaron, anything from you on the tag division before we take a break?
No, I agree with you guys.
All right. Well, we will take our break here on the show. And when we return, we'll talk about the negatives of the Attitude Era here on the We Can't Wrestle podcast. We'll be right back.